So basically my childhood growing up was pretty normal. Typical Jehovah's Witness life, minister going out in this ministry service every Saturday morning, going to meetings 3 times a week, going to our conventions, learning what we learn through our parents and through what the organization teaches us. So I felt like, well, I need to get baptized. This is something I want for my life. This is what I want to do, which is the picture of me actually getting baptized. I was 14 years old on that day. And on that day I met my abuser. That was my reward, right, for dedicating my life to God. Going forward from that point, I wanted to do regular pioneer work, which meant 80 hours a month of volunteer service. And I filled out the application, was approved. Mike Rust, the abuser, was also a regular pioneer and a ministerial servant in the congregation. And he was introduced to me through my father and through other elders. They knew that he worked with the younger brothers in the congregation to help them move forward and become stronger spiritually, supposedly. In the beginning, at the age of 14, when I first met him, we were going out in service a lot, and things kind of seemed normal. This would be the grooming process. As you would continue to go out in the ministry, it would lead to, at some point, probably a couple months after, maybe a month and a half, where we would go and have study. And we would study at his house, where at that point, I was then introduced to pornographic material. Started out as Victoria's Secret catalogs, moved forward more into pornographic material. That went on for a few months. Then it turned into truth and dare games, turned into, whatever. At about 9 months after I met him is when the touching began. Just like in the movie Spotlight, I happened to watch that before I got here, so I'm going to just lay it out there. I had to perform fellatio many times, hundreds. There was a couple other occasions where it got more serious even than that. So I went through this for about 3 years. Remembering that the hours that you do as a pioneer is 80 hours a week, and I'm 80 hours a month, and I'm to be with him. Well, I'm with him 80 hours a month to do this supposedly. So he had an open access to me. I would probably see him 4, 5 times a week. My parents loved him. They did not know what was going on. I did not know how to tell them what was going on. I was ashamed. So I just let it continue to go on because I didn't know how to tell them, and I didn't know how to get away from him. So I was in a real pickle. By the time I was 17, I learned how to break away from all that. I got away from him. I got away from basically my parents' beliefs. I started engaging in drugs, and I started to become a very violent person. Nobody could understand why I was this way. My parents couldn't understand it. They're all on like, what's going on? And I just kept running from the situation. By the time I was 21, as everyone said, 20 or 21, I'm really not sure which age group, but in that range, I decided to tell my father and my mother what I had dealt with. And when I explained it to him, my dad's first reaction, he's an elder in the congregation, was, we got to tell the elders. Not let's call the police, not let's get you some help, not this, that, and the other. We got to tell the elders. So we told the elders. And my father made a phone call to Mike Rust, said you need to tell your elders, because at that point now we were separate congregations. And so he did. Now, to my knowledge of this, and the way Jehovah's Witnesses do work, judicial committees are private. They do not discuss what's going on across the board. They don't discuss his situation with my elders to discuss with what I had said. They both just decided to disfellowship the 2 of us for homosexual activity. And of course they also used the fact that I was using drugs as well at that time as part of the disfellowshipping. That was the only way I knew how to really deal with my situation, to try to numb down that pain. Drinking. Yeah, so here I am today now. All these years I've been fighting with this, trying to figure out how to handle this, try to know how to do this. What do I do? I actually still proclaim to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. That's my faith structure. That is the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with, is trying to hold on to something that I learned as what I believe to be true because of what I've learned through the scriptures. But then to also have to see this, and believe me guys, and I'm sure you've all researched it. I know I started researching it this year. It's scary how much this is going on throughout this organization and how it seems to be just pushed aside. That can't happen anymore. And that's why the two of us are here. That's why I'm here. It cannot happen anymore. I'm here to make sure it doesn't happen anymore. I'm here to make sure that if there's any voice out there that has sees me at my age, recognizing even if they're older, that it's time for them to come forward, because it has to happen. This has to be cleansed. It has to be taken care of. So what I hope from all of this is that we start to hear more victims coming forward, whether they're children or grown adults as I am. It's got to be taken care of.
Well, Mike, before you leave, I think they find it interesting. What did he read to you to justify the conduct?
He would many times, because if I felt guilty or if I felt this isn't right, I would get a scripture read to me. We would go into it. At that time, we had a book in the organization called the Youth Book. There were chapters in there with scriptures in there that were, talking about puberty and going through the change of life and sexual this and that. And somehow he would take the scriptures and he would flip it and make me feel like this is okay, it's normal. I don't know. I can't explain why I went for it, but I did. And, that's what I have to carry. I still have nightmares. 40's gonna be 48 this year. I still have nightmares. And it's kind of getting lost for words here, but all I knew is that this has got to stop.
My name is Heather Steele. I'm 48 years old. I was born into the religion, so I didn't know anything different. My parents were best friends with two other elder families, one of them being Don Nicholson. He built my parents' house. He was a contractor. He built his house, and they were almost identical. He started abusing me while I was still in diapers, so 2 or 3, I'm not even sure. The abuse went on for about 10 years. Gradually, it started out as fondling and stuff, but it did go to oral, and it did go into actual rape after many years. By the time I was about 10 years old, I accidentally told my mom. I was scared to tell. I thought that it was a secret and it was between me and Dawn, and I did not realize that there was a whole world out there that would say this isn't right, this is not what's supposed to be happening.
You're doing great.
Okay, so when I actually came forward, like I said, it wasn't on purpose. We had seen a video at school, and I came home and asked my mom questions, and when she gave me the answers, I realized that what was going on was completely wrong. He had used Jehovah as a lot of, when I would question things, and it would be about obeying my elders and respecting parents and everything, so I was very naive to the fact that I didn't have to be living in this kind of situation. I did have the luck of having my father be a police officer, so he definitely believed me. There was no doubt about that. And actually, one of Dawn's daughters, was abused and had come forward. Then she actually recanted because the parents got to her. And shortly after that, I didn't know about Lynn confessing, but I confessed to my mom by accident. And then they put it all together that both of us couldn't be lying. So that's how we started meeting with the judicial committee. That was torture. It was a bunch of men sitting around praying for Don, having us hold hands while we prayed for him. And my mother was having nothing to do with that. She took me out of the room and just said, that's too much. She doesn't need to be dealing with that. She's dealt with enough. They tried very hard to keep it a secret. The elders met with us probably 5 or 6 times within a month period. Luckily, like I said, my dad was a police officer, so the school got involved, and when the school got involved, my father realized the only choice he really had was to go forward and have him arrested. He did do a couple of years in prison, but he got out. I think only 3 years later. He also had a reunification program at the prison where he abused his own daughters on the weekends. He was, at the time, this was back in the early 80s, he had come forward to about 15 other girls, so definitely wasn't alone. He was so manipulative that if he couldn't have access to me, he would arrange to go into my parents' house when they weren't home, take apart my dad's rifles, put them on my mom's side of the bed, scare my mom basically to death, so she wouldn't want to stay alone in the house while my dad was working overnights as a police officer. So of course he'd be like, oh, just bring them over here. So he would do that. That went on for almost a year. So if he hadn't seen us and had access to us either at the Kingdom Hall or at my parents' house or their house, then he would take those measures to make sure that he could get me back to his house. So I didn't really question anything because I didn't know any different until I got to be about 10, 11 years old, and that's when when I came forward, I started to realize how terrible everything really was, and that none of the stuff I had thought was true. I felt guilt because I didn't want to not believe in Jehovah or do something against the religion, but at the same time, I wanted to get away from Don. The reason I'm bringing a lawsuit is because I had no justice in the situation. Yes, he did go to prison, but it was for such a short time, and he found that time to abuse his own daughters. I want to come forward so other people have a voice. It's not an easy situation to come out and tell this kind of story, but if it helps other girls or boys, whatever it is in that congregation, or anywhere actually, I want to do it for that purpose. And with the Children Victims Act passing, we've waited for years trying to get that to pass, and I'm very, very pleased that it went, and we will be able to find some kind of justice for the situations that we were put in as children growing up in that religion. Is there anything else? Thank you for your time.